Iron Maiden's fourth album, Food for Thought, featuring Flight of Icarus. Come to the Food for Thought tour.
That'll be a banquet.
Hello and welcome to Maiden Voyages, a podcast series devoted to exploring the peerless discography of your favourite heavy metal band and mine, Iron Maiden. Across this series, we'll be journeying through the band's entire discography, discussing, analysing, dissecting, celebrating, and possibly commiserating every single Iron Maiden record. This episode, we pick up the story in 1983 to explore Iron Maiden's barnstorming fourth album, Peace of Mind.
Sorry, barnstorming.
I'm running out of adjectives to describe the albums, right? I was thinking,
wow.
What was Number of the Beast game-changing?
Yeah.
Peace of Mind maybe not game-changing, but barnstorming.
It wasn't recorded at a farm.
No, not like No Prayer for the Dying, which was recorded in a barn.
Huh.
Anyway, let's introduce ourselves. My name's Blev, an historian of sorts and an Iron Maiden superfan.
My name's Sam, a writer of sorts, and I like Iron Maiden as a friend.
Excellent.
That joke didn't really work this time. Oh well.
We can edit in the laughter after, it's fine. Ha-ha! Excellent humour. So...
It's going to be a long episode, isn't it?
So, when did you first remember hearing Peace of Mind as a full piece of music?
A full piece of mind. That is a good question. I can't put the exact year on it, but it'll be around 2006, 2007. Because I have a very specific memory of, in my house at the time when we first moved in there, we had like a little computer room that was in the basement floor of the house, and it was just like this sweatbox of a room with no windows or anything. And I just have a very visual memory of the Peace of Mind album sat on the desk there and listening to it.
Nice.
In this windowless dark room.
Yeah, I have
the best way to enjoy any music.
Of course. I have a feeling. I think I got this quite soon after getting into Maiden.
Yeah.
Like getting hooked immediately in about 2002-3 and just buying everything I could in the days before streaming and all that. So just seeing what records they had in the shop. So you sort of ended up listening to the albums in the slightly random order of whatever ones happened to be in the shop you were in. But I do remember getting Peace of Mind. But of course it's a bit of a weird one because it's got, well, as we'll go on to discuss, lots of iconic tracks on it. You feel like you know a big chunk of it before you get into it, don't you, really?
By the time I got the full album, I knew half of it really well because although streaming wasn't around at that time, the way I was discovering music a lot of the time was just downloading the big hits off of LimeWire or Kazaa or something. Please don't sue me. I've since bought all the music legally. It's fine.
He does. I can vouch for the fact he does own a lot of music.
But because of that, you would just get things quite piecemeal rather than listening to things as a whole album.
The word peace is coming up a lot this episode, isn't it?
Give peace a chance, brother.
So before we get on to the record, do we have some unfinished business from last time? Any facts from the number? No, not. Yeah, the Number of the Beast steps. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, no, because the facts that I do have are, I think they predate that. So. Basically, I have not been very good at doing Pedant's Corner this time round, but we have a couple of small things. So one of them was we were discussing Maiden playing, I can't even remember what episode this is now, but Maiden playing the Marquee 5 nights in a row and intimating it was about 5,000 people. The size of Brixton Academy was your assertion.
Yeah.
So they played to the size of Brixton Academy in 1 week. I wasn't really sure how large Brixton Academy was. I always thought it was bigger than that. So I fact-checked that. Turns out Brixton Academy is 4,921 capacity, according to Google. So you were bang on, basically.
Nice. Well, that's actually surprising, because I thought the capacity of Brixton was more than that.
Yeah, well, you said 5,000 in a previous episode.
I just don't know what I'm talking about.
But also, I guess, thinking about those marquee gigs, even though in total 5,000 people might have attended them, they wouldn't be 5,000 unique people. There would be people doing multiple nights of the show.
True.
So they wouldn't I don't think Maiden would have just about been able to play Brixton Academy yet.
Yeah.
But that's on Killer's tour, I think we were talking about.
Still a lot of people,
Still a lot of people, yeah, particularly for them.
I mean, these days, can you think of a metal band who are headlining Brixton on their second album? I mean, bands
Not off the top of my head, no.
Just thinking of a band, Behemoth did it very recently.
Yeah.
And you think they've been going for about, 30 years at this point. That's how long it sort of takes to get there.
Yeah, I mean, we saw Mastodon headline there on their 4th or 5th album.
Yeah, and they might have done it the album before, but given the gaps between albums as well, it still took them...
It's still 20 years of build-up, right? It's impressive. Yeah.
Any other facts?
The only other thing is not even a fact, to be honest, but we keep on discussing this alleged Grimsby gig of Iron Maiden, where Steve Harris took over vocal duties and trying to find any evidence of it. Whilst there's still no video evidence of that gig in particular, it did turn out that there were other gigs where Steve Harris took on vocal duties. So on gig they played in Wakefield, classic metal venue, at the Unity Hall, there's a bootleg recording on YouTube of basically Paul Di'Anno coming on stage, saying he's unable to sing. He's going to do a couple of bits, but Steve's going to do the rest. And so you can hear Steve do surprisingly good vocals, actually.
Yeah, because I had no idea this existed until we had that conversation. I thought, let's check it out. And I came across that as well. And I was surprised that Steve's voice is...
It's much more solid than I expected.
Yeah, much better than I thought it would be. I mean, yeah.
To be fair, and this is not a fair thing on my part, but I fully expected Steve Harris's voice to sound like Dick Van Dyke and Mary Poppins. just by virtue of how he speaks. It's kind of like, okay, we're gonna get some proper Cockney geezer singing. And that's not fair. He's actually quite a capable vocalist.
Yeah, he's quite decent. I was thinking about Steve Harris's voice. I was rewatching the Early Days documentary.
As I'm lying in the dark with my eyes closed, drifting off to sleep.
Steve.
Sweet dulcet tones.
I was rewatching the Early Days
baseline
documentary, and he's got a really likeable, that sort of classic East London accent, but he does sound very gormless, doesn't he?
Ooh, it's a little harsh.
You know what I mean? It's just like, I was just like, guys in the band. I was playing the bass, really. I wrote the songs, and
I read it less as gormless and more just, weirdly, I kind of read it as just intensely uncomfortable.
Yeah, that would be kinder, actually.
That's kind of the vibe I get. I don't think he's speaking that way to his mates. I think it's more just, I don't like being put on the spot and doing the interviews that much, to be honest.
Let's go with your kinder assessment.
Either that or he's gormless.
Yeah.
Those are the two options, apparently.
I feel bad now. Sorry, Steve.
You're horrible.
We love you. Before we get into the background of the album, quick quiz.
Quick quiz.
Or
quiz.
A quick quiz, or as I like to call it, be quiz or be dead. So, we've got 4 questions in total for this album.
Okay.
So let's split them up. Let's take 2 now, and then we'll leave 2 for part 2.
Okay.
So, question 1.
Just to clarify, is this going to be a 2-parter? We won't know until it's in editing.
No, we'll see.
Please make it a 2-parter.
We'll do our best. We always do our best. So, number 1.
Our best isn't good enough, Blevin.
Question 1. Peace of Mind is one of 4, maybe 5, Maiden albums to not feature a title track. What are the others?
No
Bonus
Prayer
point
for
if
the
you
dying?
No, there's a song called No Prayer for the Dying.
I've never listened to it. Oh, I don't like this. This is horrible. Okay. Somewhere in Time, sort of.
So yeah, that is my brackets 5.
That's your bracket
sort
5.
of.
Virtual 11.
Yep.
X Factor.
Tick.
A Matter of Life and Death.
Yeah. Well, you've got them, haven't you? Because I said it's 1 or 4. So, 5. So yeah, that's all of them.
Yeah.
X Factor, Virtual 11, A Matter of Life and Death, and Somewhere in Time, because the song's called Caught Somewhere in Time. But
that's 3/4.
Well,
you said 4/5.
Well, yeah, not if you include Peace of Mind.
Oh.
So it's...
Okay.
Christ, this is becoming a maths quiz now. It's like, oh, no. I didn't sign up for this.
Just can't do the mental arithmetic.
And question 2, for the time being. What was the working title of Peace of Mind? Clue, it's hilariously bad.
Album number 4.
I'd say it's worse than that, actually.
Mambo number 5? Is there any way I can guess it?
I mean, it's kind of it's sort of in the same vein of kind of wordplay, bad pun.
I got nothing.
Food for thought.
Ooh. That is a very Spinal Tap album name.
It just sounds like it should be the title of Gordon Ramsay's autobiography or something to me. Like,
yeah.
Food for thought. My life in cooking. And
my life in kitchens screaming at people for television shows.
I just can't imagine if this album had actually been called Iron Maiden's 4th album, Food for Thought, featuring Flight of Icarus. Come to the Food for Thought tour.
There'll be a banquet.
Yeah, shockingly bad. So just as well.
I now wish there was a Food for Thought tour. They just coupled it with a sit-down meal. You know, like in American shows, sometimes you see those gigs where it's literally people sitting at tables watching a show.
Yeah.
It would be that, but with Iron Maiden. You're having a nice steak, you know.
I mean, that sounds
really
lovely.
Great. Let's do that.
Yeah, I'd be really up for that.
Iron Maiden, if you're up for that, Rod, give us a call.
Yeah, no, definitely.
So, I know a caterer.
Let's get into the background of the album. So, picking up where we left off. So, Number of the Beast comes out, critical and commercial acclaim.
Yeah.
Elevates the band to a totally different level of success and fame and everything else, reaping the rewards of getting Bruce in and just that amazing collection of songs. So, obviously, Maiden being Maiden, album comes out, time for another massive tour. So, the Beast on the Road tour. Yeah, back on the road. So, they start off in the UK, beginning of 1982, followed by a very extensive European tour, and it's perhaps worth commenting at this point the size of the crowds they're playing to, even in Europe.
Yeah.
So, according to Mick Wall, their gig in Paris was in front of a crowd of 5,000 people.
Size of Brixton Academy.
So, yeah, size of Brixton Academy. The Brixton Academy, as it's called in Paris.
Sorry, anyone from France.
And audiences of up to 8,000 people in Spain.
Cool.
I think perhaps the thing that marks of this tour, apart from the Killers tour, other than the fact they're playing to many more people, they're spending a lot more time in the United States this time round.
That makes sense.
So in 1982 alone, they end up playing 106 gigs in America. Yeah. That's a lot. It is, right? That's just America, right? And largely still as a support band, so they haven't quite made that headliner jump.
Who are they supporting? Priest?
Yes, again.
I just assumed Priest. I just couldn't think of another metal band that Maiden would be supporting in the States.
Well, they do quite a big trek supporting Rainbow.
Oh.
Which, again, is kind of interesting, because this is...
What lineup of Rainbow is that?
Well, this is Joe Lynn Turner era.
Ooh.
Yeah, so...
I mean, great voice, but not a great time for Rainbow.
It's very much Richie Blackmore going, we're going to break America of our sort of pop rock, smooth kind of image. So, yeah, it's a slightly odd bill, but... Yeah,
that's fine. A weird bill.
And .38 Special, who I don't really know much about other than the name.
Who?
Yeah, they were quite big, but I think again they're like a southern rock band.
Great fit for a Maiden tour.
Yeah, but I think this was the bill. I think it was Rainbow .38 Special and Iron Maiden.
That is an odd bill.
Yeah, and they also do some shows of the Scorpions as well.
That makes more sense.
That is pretty sensible. That makes sense. And they do a couple of headline shows in Canada and New York. There's a bit of controversy surrounding the New York show. So they do a headline show at the New York Palladium.
Yeah.
And to advertise the gig, there's a poster drawn up. And I wish I could find this image, but it shows, apparently, Eddie biting the head off Ozzy Osbourne.
Nice.
In a nice, it's fun,
That's
isn't
quite
it?
Funny.
I think it's quite good. Yeah, because that was still quite the hot controversy.
Yeah.
82, that was quite, hot news. That is until Don Arden, of being Sharon Osbourne's dad, fame, and managing Ozzy Osbourne, I presume, at that point.
Yeah, before Sharon takes over.
Called Smallwood to say he thought it was in very poor taste and decided it should be removed.
I mean, if anything was in poor taste, it was biting the head off a bat.
Yeah, that wasn't quite poor taste.
I mean, it would taste bad at least.
Yeah.
Although I believe, isn't it sort of an urban legend that doesn't he just bite the head off a plastic?
No, well, you're sort
or he thinks it's a plastic
Yes,
bat.
so you're sort of So it's Ozzy Osbourne says someone throws what was apparently a live bat on stage. He thought it was a toy.
Sorry, who?
Yeah.
The bigger question here is not why did Ozzy bite the head off the bat, assuming it's a plastic toy, but who's bringing a live bat to any show?
And
not just an Aussie show, just any show.
And the other question is how hammered do you have to be to not be able to tell the difference between a rubber bat that is lifeless and a live bat? At least when you put it in your mouth, surely you're thinking,
oh, I've made a huge mistake.
This is quite warm. Like, why is it moving? Why is it squealing really loudly?
Why is this plastic struggling?
Yeah.
Oh, God.
So anyway, Don Arden did not like that very much.
Well, maybe get better clients, Don Arden.
Yeah, quite possibly. There's also the usual. I mean, there's no point going into all the sort of jokes and japes. You can imagine what it was like being young men in America. You know, bunch of East End lads. You know, you're on the road.
Some bad shit happens
in a bus. Well, talking of bad shit happening, one particularly unsavoury anecdote that is...
Oh, so you've been holding on to this anecdote for a long time. Blevin keeps mentioning when we discuss recording the next podcast episode, he's like, I've got this amazing, horrible anecdote for the Peace of Mind episode. So this has been like a month in the making. I'm ready to go.
Okay, here we go.
Me. I'm going to be disgusted, I'm sure.
And full disclaimer, before anyone comes at me or tries to potentially sue me
I didn't
for
do
it. This story is in print, but it's in Gary Bushell. So Gary Bushell, I think, wrote for Krang.
Right.
And Sounds before that. And in the mid-'80s, he writes and publishes an authorised Maiden book called Running Free, which is now out of print, I think, basically. But it's available on the internet if you look for it.
Like all books.
Indeed, yeah. And describing the Number of the Beast tour, he tells a little anecdote, which at the times, this all seems to be, you know, very good fun. But Rod Smallwood, basically, judge for yourselves. Rod Smallwood, when the band went to America, he has a stern word of the crew telling them to avoid, quote, any jailbait because of the various laws about American states and different ages of consent. And he says if anyone is caught with any girl who turns out to be underage, they're getting a one-way ticket back to the UK. Fair enough warning.
That seems... I mean, it's seedy but fair.
Yeah, fair enough. Until Rod is then seen with a girl who apparently is 16 years old, to use Gary Bushell's term, getting off with, and then the crew, as a hilarious joke, give him a fake one-way ticket back to the UK.
How old is Rod at this point?
I did work it out. He was about our age.
Which, for viewers at home, is 33.
It might have been a year or two younger. He was, I think he was at least 30.
Twice this person's age. That is gross, man.
That is a creepy story.
Yeah. Oh. So not only is he a hypocrite, he's also a creep.
Yeah.
A hypocrite.
I mean, the story isn't elaborated on much more than that. It's just quite interesting in the context of the 80s how this story is presented. It's
so fun. Traumatizing.
Hang on, she's a child.
Yeah. She can't even drink.
What is going on? I mean, I guess in the eyes of UK law, legal, but...
That's not how these things should be worked out.
You know, I'm not sure I'm trying to defend Rod Smallwood here, but...
Just because something is legal doesn't make it the right thing to do. That's not how morals work.
No. And funnily enough, that story has never been repeated since.
I wonder why.
Until now.
Oh, we're getting so sued, aren't we? This is how the podcast ends, folks.
I presume Gary Bushell's still alive, so take it up with Gary Bushell.
Yeah, but Rod will find us.
Yeah.
Rod always finds his mark.
And I guess the other thing... Well, I say as if that is like a noteworthy story from the band's American
tour. That was not noteworthy. That was upsetting.
Let's bury that forever now. But Maiden also, or one of the things that comes out of that US tour is the band getting caught up in the satanic panic of the early 1980s. And the people showing up to picket their shows from the Christian right and ultra-conservatives and copies of Number of the Beast being burnt and the general furore surrounding that whole strange period in American history.
Yeah. I mean, you say strange period in American history, it's pretty par for the course in Western history, full stop. Like for the late 20th century or 20th century as a whole. Like I listened a lot to a rival podcast called You're Wrong About, and one of the people leading that has written books about the Satanic Panic, and a lot of their episodes focus on it. And it's just, there's always going to be moral uproar if something doesn't fit a particular white form of Christianity, right?
Yeah, I thought it was going to say. I thought it was going to stop at white. I was like, Iron Maiden are pretty white. Like, as music goes.
I mean, they're super white.
I mean, they are the most white band on the planet, really.
But I more mean anything that sort of flirts with, I guess, unsavory imagery, whether that's
spooky stuff.
Spooky stuff, right? Like whether it's Iron Maiden, like talking about the devil, whether it's slasher films, whether it's Wasp talking about beasts and how they procreate, like the whole fact that like late 80s America has the PMRC and everything that comes with that, or mid 80s America, I should say. Yeah, it's not that surprising, and it's not that strange a period in American history in that you still have nowadays the Westboro Baptist Church amongst others, right?
But I'm not an expert on the Satanic Panic, but the little digging I did, what I didn't quite appreciate was how kind of seriously this was taken at all levels of society, to the point where the police are actively investigating people. This is reported in mainstream news outlets almost as fact.
If you see clips of metal shows in 80s America, I remember watching, can't even remember what it's from. Maybe it's in Decline of Western Civilization, or maybe it's in something else, but literal 16, 17-year-olds in like their denim jackets and stuff going into a gig, but all being very aggressively frisked and checked for anything that could be linked to general debauchery, whether that's drugs or knives or whatever. And it's just, these are just kids going to a metal show just because they look the way that seems questionable to you. Hi everyone, this is Sam in the editing room. I don't entirely know what's happened, but at some point during this episode, the end of this conversation didn't actually record. I have no idea what the segue was, but we'll rejoin myself and Blev somehow talking about Maiden playing Reading Festival in 1982. So just imagine there was a really pithy and seamless transition. Thanks.
Like Gillan Band and Gary Moore and
Gillan Band.
Yeah, also Gillan, they were just known as then. They were known as the Ian Gillan Band. It's kind of your usual suspects. Tigers of Pantang are probably hanging around.
Tigers of Pantang.
Yeah, you've never heard of the Tigers of Pantang?
No, I know. I've heard of them. It's just to think of them on the Reading.
Yeah, they were there. And sort of people like Pat Travers' band. UFO? Were UFO that year?
Budgie, a headline. So I've just Googled it. Budgie were one of the headliners.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Come on, what a time to be alive.
And then Michael Schenker Group.
Yes, please. I'm keen for that. But what is kind of amazing for Maiden is, like, looking at that lineup there, Budgie and Michael Schenker, at least
Overkill are on this lineup.
Not the Overkill, surely.
What other Overkill is there?
Well, Overkill formed in 1982?
Let's find out.
Okay. But
talk amongst yourselves.
But what is, I think, really amazing from Iron Maiden's point of view is that they would have grown up loving Michael Schenker and UFO and loving Budgie, and now they are on that same pedestal, that same billing as bands. Well, they literally have covered UFO and Budgie songs, right? They loved those bands growing up. Sorry,
it's a different Overkill. It's a Nwabum band called Overkill.
Yeah, that makes more sense.
It's not Bobby Blitz. And
no, that would
have been so cool.
Yeah. Although Twisted Sister on one of those very early 1980s Reading bills.
That makes sense. Twisted Sister, for some reason, were really big in the UK on their first couple of albums, like Under the Blade and You Can't Stop Rock and Roll, both released by a UK label because no one in the States would sign them. Secret Records, I think it was.
That's some good Twisted Sister knowledge.
Really like Twisted Sister.
Well done.
What a band.
The only other little point of note from the Reading Festival headline set.
Oh yeah, we're talking about Iron Maiden.
Yes,
right.
Yes, this is an Iron Maiden. I will remind you, Sam, this is an Iron Maiden podcast. Stick to the brief. Stop trying to talk about Twisted Sister or Halloween.
Think about Halloween.
Stop it. But Iron Maiden do an encore with the, again, southern rock band Blackfoot, doing a cover of Tush by ZZ Top.
Wait, is Bruce singing?
Yeah. I presume Bruce and someone from Blackfoot, yeah.
Okay, we've got to try and find some kind of record of that.
Yes.
That sounds great.
Yes, we do.
And stupid.
But it's also, I mean, everything seems to be going very well, and it really is. But this is also where we start to get that creative, dynamic tension emerging between Steve Harris, I guess as the band's founder and for a long time its central member, oddly for a bass player, and the new singer, Bruce, trying to assert himself in a way that Di'Anno never seemed to.
If you remember in the in the Number of the Beast episodes, we talked about how Bruce immediately said to Rod Smallwood, like, you're not going to get someone who just sits and listens. I'm going to have opinions, kind of thing.
Calm down, mate.
I don't know why it sounds like Phil Mitchell.
But yeah, and that really starts to bubble through in this tour. And again, revisiting the early days documentary, Bruce's take on it is interesting because, as he says, when he joined Iron Maiden, he said it was basically Steve Harris. So I thought this was quite mean to the other guys Maiden, but probably true. He said it was basically Steve Harris and a bunch of very passive guys.
Yeah.
Who are quite happy just to go with what Steve said. And that sounds kind of about right.
Well, yeah, that makes sense. Like, Steve is, firstly, the consistent thread of the band. I mean, I guess Dave Murray's been there since day one, but no one else has been.
Yeah, and also Dave Murray seems like just the most chilled out person on the planet.
Yeah. That man is relaxed.
I mean, like, you know, I'm broadly happy in my own skin, but there are days I think, I wouldn't mind being Dave Murray. Like, just, if I could be anyone in Iron Maiden, Dave Murray just seems to have the best
just seems
time.
Really settled.
Yeah, just loving life. But Bruce was not going to be that person, right? So
shock.
It seems to come.
Horror.
It seems to come to a head on stage, particularly in terms of where they should be in terms of the stage positions. So Steve's take on this. So to quote Steve Harris, there were nights on stage during the early part of the tour when Bruce used to try and jostle me on stage. It was like an ego thing.
Yeah.
So Bruce, as the singer, believed that he should be front and centre of the stage, and that's where his monitors should be.
Which makes total sense, if I'm honest, Steve.
It is kind of weird being the bass player, having your monitors and being at the front of the stage.
That makes no sense, man.
So what you seem to have is this running battle whereby Bruce would move his monitors to the front of the stage.
Yeah.
Steve would get the roadies to move them back. And this sort of seesaw back and forth goes on for a while. And Bruce was saying how there's all this kind of on-stage sort of jostling. Bruce actually says, in the end, what I did, I got an extra long microphone stand, and I had a microphone stand that was like a tank trap for bass players. and if you see his microphone stand, it's got these 3 prongs at the end of it from around this time. There's no need to stabilise your mic stand. But it just seems that Bruce could position it in such a way that if Steve came running up next to him,
trip Steve up.
He could basically just smack Steve in the face or something. And so this seems to be the simmering tension. It does seem to play out, but what's interesting is that basically Bruce seems to win out in the end.
Yeah, and I think that's fair enough, right? Part of the reason you recruited Bruce Dickinson is because he's such a good frontman.
Yeah. Just a few more choice words from Bruce Dickinson, his take on it. He said, when I'm not singing, you, i.e. Steve, can stand there. But when I'm singing, I fucking stand there. I put extra long legs on my microphone stand so you would trip over them, and you went fucking spare.
Well, that sounds like a healthy dynamic.
Yeah. But going to Rod, at one point, Steve was shouting, I want him, i.e. Bruce fucking gone. I can't stand him. But it all seems to kind of calm down and mellow, and Bruce gets his way in the end. And I guess I feel every time we've done one of these episodes so far, we always have to talk about a member leaving.
But we don't have to this time.
No, we do.
Ah.
Think about it. Who's going?
Oh, does Clive leave?
Clive goes, yeah.
I thought he was on Peace of Mind.
No, it's Nico's first album.
Oh,
I could have done that as a person would be dead. Damn.
Well, clearly I just didn't research this album before doing this episode.
So, yeah, the departure of Clive Burr is really interesting because I thought I knew the story, but it's a lot murkier than I thought it was.
Right.
So, well, let's just go through the various different points of view. So, going back to Gary Bushel's book, that is the authorised account published in the mid-80s.
Yeah.
He says Clive Burr left Iron Maiden after Christmas 1982 for, quote, personal reasons.
Right.
Which is the usual sort of...
It's just a get-out clause. It means nothing.
Right. It means absolutely nothing. That's the standard band thing when they say we don't really want to discuss it. But the split is described as being amicable. Fast forward to the early days documentary, and Steve Harris basically says, we gave Clive 3 months to sort himself out. Doesn't elaborate on what that means. Just says we gave himself 3 months to sort himself out, and he didn't. Now, Adrian Smith...
Sort himself out from what?
Well, this is where Adrian elaborates. Adrian says, let's say Clive embraced the rock and roll lifestyle maybe a little too much.
Right.
That's why he ended up leaving the band. Because he's a great drummer and a great guy, but it just got a bit much for him, and so he had to make a change. So that was very sad. And there were rumours circulating about Clive Burr's excessive behaviour.
Right.
Drinking in particular. Stories about him having to have a bucket next to his drum kit so he could just...
Okay. That's pretty extreme.
It's quite considerate, though, isn't it? To at least go in a bucket rather than...
rather than the floor.
Vomit all over your snare drum. Like, no.
Oh, God.
But this is so far so unmurky, right? This is just like Paul Di'Anno repeating itself. But dig a little deeper, and interestingly, very little of what I'm about to say is mentioned in Mick Wall's book, Run to the Hills, the other authorised Maiden biography. And actually, Mick Wall says he approached Clive Burr for an interview and didn't hear anything back.
Right.
Although Clive Burr does show up on the early days documentary, so make of that what you will. But basically, during the Number of the Beast tour, Clive Burr's father passed away at the age of 57. So
relatively young.
Yeah, quite young, of a heart attack. So Clive Burr obviously returns to England to see to his father's affairs, to have a bit of grieving time. Not very long. He's back in the USA, go to the funeral, etc.
Yeah.
Who do you think fills in for Clive Burr while he's away?
I assume it's going to be Nico.
It is Nico McBrain.
Was Nico Clive's drum tech?
No, but Nico had a relationship with Iron Maiden because he toured with the band when he was in Trust.
He was in Trust, right?
Yeah.
And also, actually, just looking at that Reading lineup, Trust are on the bill.
Yeah, exactly. Actually,
just weird serendipity there.
Put that in for a fact check if McBrain was Burr's drum tech. I don't think he was, but certainly he'd spent a lot of time around the guys in Maiden and the Maiden camp. But in one quite revealing interview of Clive Burr, and to be fair to Clive Burr, he's usually retained quite a dignified silence in the whole thing. He's doesn't seem to hold a grudge about it. But one interview I came across, he says, I got back, in other words, from his father's funeral to the USA, and I could tell something wasn't right. There was a meeting. The atmosphere was tense. There was a change in the air. And he was told, we think it's time for a break. And that was that.
Right.
So
it sounds like it was more of a strategic change then.
Yeah.
Like Clive might have had excesses and stuff going on, but at the same time, it sounds like trying out Nico, something clicked.
Yeah, but what's more is it seems very much Steve's decision.
Well, obviously.
Well, no, but in the sense, I think there was a kind of consensus in the band that Paul had to go.
Yeah, okay.
Whereas Adrian Smith and Bruce both seem, when they do talk about it, they seem quite regretful.
Right.
Like Adrian Smith in particular says he felt like a bit of a hypocrite going to the meeting of Clive because Adrian said, my behaviour was pretty much as bad as his.
Right.
And a part of me thought, kind of, why is he the one that's...
Yeah, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, whilst obviously throwing up on stage or throwing up at any job is a weird thing, in the context of like 80s metal band, I don't doubt they were all pretty awful in many ways, right?
True.
Like, it seems weird to single out Clive on that, where he's still performing well. It's not like with Paul, where the issue was Paul just couldn't perform a lot because of his
exactly, like actually cancelling gigs.
But like cancelling gigs, going AWOL, not being able to sing, that's very different to Clive Burr's situation.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you listen to Steve, he'd suggest that Clive's performance was affected, but Bruce in particular seems to basically reckon it comes down to a personality clash between Steve and Clive.
Right.
So this is what Bruce has to say, I quote. Bruce says, it wasn't about partying or girls, because everybody was guilty of that at some time or another.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting, because that's not Steve's take. Artistic differences, he says, would be to overstate his creative input, which is a bit mean, but yeah, he's not a songwriter.
Yeah.
He says the breakdown of the relationship between a drummer and a bass player is pretty fundamental, especially if the bass player also happens to be the principal songwriter and band leader.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, make of that what you will. I mean,
it's not surprising it's Steve's decision. At this point, Steve is still very much the focal point, even if Bruce is there. And yeah, I hadn't thought of it from the perspective of, obviously, a bassist and a drummer have to have a specific creative and musical relationship to lock in together. But yeah, it's weird.
Yeah, and so, and this is it. At the end of the year, Clive is fired. There's no two ways about it. You know, contrary to what Gary Bushell said in the mid-'80s about him leaving for personal relationships, I think... Sure, yeah, no, I think everyone agrees he was fired. And this is sadly where Clive Burr leaves the Iron Maiden story.
Boo.
I know, I have a lot of love for Clive Burr. I mean, he does go on to play music, and he, pops up in Trust, weirdly.
Wait, he pops up in Trust?
Yeah, so it basically does a swap of Dick and upgrade from it. He's briefly playing with Graham Bonnet in Alcatraz. He's in...
Man, Alcatraz has such a weird star-studded lineup throughout its history for a band that's not fantastic. Like, I quite like them, but they're not great.
Burr also pops up in Gog Magog.
Is that with Paul Di'Anno?
Yes, and Yannick Gers.
Ooh.
Like, I think there's definitely a bonus episode somewhere on Gog Magog. It's a very weird story.
I think there's a lot of interesting Maiden spin-offs, especially as you get towards late 80s, early 90s.
And
some odd splaying of the family tree.
He's in Desperados, Dee Snider's late 80s.
Yeah, with Bernie Tormé.
Yeah, and I think that's...
No, that's Widowmaker. There's several Dee Snider bands.
Well, he pops up in Desperados with Dee Snider anyway, which is...
Cool.
Interesting, yeah. But then sadly, his sort of the latter part of his career is largely cut short and defined by his battle with multiple sclerosis. Yeah. Which is, I believe he's diagnosed in the 1990s, and eventually that stops him playing drums altogether. Yeah. And there's a charity formed, the Clive Burr MS Trust Fund, which, to be fair to the guys in Maiden, they've done various things.
They've always supported it, yeah.
Yeah, and Burr sadly passed away in 2013, age 56.
Weirdly, very similar timing to his father.
Yes, that is, yeah. Very similar timing. But yeah, a real sad loss, and like
definitely.
I was going to say a sort of sad end to his career, but you see him being interviewed on the Early Days documentary, and he seems so full of cheer and
he does
so
seem very upbeat.
So sort of all respect to him for when you've defined yourself as a drummer.
Yeah,
I think losing that ability that is your
it's got to be heartbreaking.
Yeah, it's got to be absolutely awful.
But I think we've talked about it in pretty much all the previous album episodes. There is something really definitive about Clive Burr's drumming in terms of shaping a bunch of the songs in those albums, right? Like, obviously, you can signpost to Run to the Hills, and that absolutely iconic drum beginning is very important to the song. But we've talked about the beginning of Genghis Khan, or a bunch of other songs where it's Clive's feel that really brings the rhythm to the forefront and gives things a bit more of a groove rather than keeping things so locked in and grid-based. And yeah, to lose that is a shame.
Definitely.
Not that Nico's a downgrade or anything, it's just different styles.
Yeah.
But yeah, having done these episodes and this podcast, my opinion of Clive Burr, I never had an opinion before, and now I feel he's quite an underrated drummer. He is the Steven Adler of Iron Maiden.
But he is a better drummer than Steven.
Yeah, that's fair. But
they both.
But
look
that
very
sense
cool.
of having feel, right, is something that's underrated in metal. It's the same with Lars in Metallica. Maybe not the greatest technical drummer, particularly in metal, but he has a great sense of feel, and he understands how to accent the songwriting really well. Like, Lars and James is a great mix because Lars knows how to work with James riffs, and I think that's a really underrated quality in metal writing.
Definitely. And also, I would say about Clive Burr, the only genuine drum hero to emerge from the new wave of British heavy metal.
Yeah.
I mean...
Wait, what about...
You think of Thunderstick?
Yeah, I was going to say, what's his chops? Thunder.
Thunder. Yeah, that says it all, doesn't it? Also,
I mean, I'd never heard of him before we did this. So.
Thunderstick was really only famous for wearing a gimp mask and playing in a cage.
Probably not what you want on your CV.
No, I don't think he would.
Can you play the drums? Well, I can wear a gimp mask.
You're in. It was a trick question. Yeah, that was the answer all along. Yeah, but in terms of someone who was actually genuinely great and went on to influence certainly Lars, like you said about the Motor Breath intro and like a host of other people. I think Clive Burr is the one. And actually, I did have a look at the tributes paid to him when he died, and one of the people who was full of praise for Clive was Dave Lombardo.
That's interesting.
Yeah, who said, those records had a massive influence on me.
Makes sense. I mean, we talked before about Slayer being very influenced by Iron Maiden, more so than they were Venom.
Let's move on, shall we? And, have a drink of this delicious bottle of Trooper of Drinking to Clive. Here's to Clive.
For a moment there, that sounded like a sponsored spot in this podcast. Full-bodied, rich-tasting Trooper beer from Robinson's Brewery. Please sponsor us and provide free products.
I just love the idea that I'd choose Clive Burr's death to and now a word from our sponsors.
Well, we are tasteless.
Unlike this delicious bottle.
Oh man, we're getting so sued.
Anyway, enter Nico McBrain.
When do we reach the album?
We're almost there. We've got a little bit. We just need to talk about Nico, then we're into the album.
Okay.
So Nico McBrain, thoughts?
Fantastic drummer. I mean, I'm not someone who knows a huge amount about drumming, but he always seems very good. I always find the discussion around him using a single bass pedal very weird, in that, like, he's very adamant that it's all he needs, and he's quite dismissive of people using double bass pedal, which I just think is different styles, and it's weird. Just use it or don't use it. I don't care. Yeah, I know, but and it's stuck on those weird things like Steve Harris firing that producer after he said you have to play with a pick. Like, it's just this oddly muso-y sort of kind of macho thing of like, no. I don't think Nico McBrain is a better drummer for using a single pedal. It just means he can't do certain things, and that's fine. Like, it's a stylistic choice, totally valid. But he's not going to be Gene Hoglan anytime soon. No, and to be fair, I'm not sure Maiden's music really calls for it much of the I don't know, I like a bit of double bass in anything, really. But that's because I'm ruined by years of power metal, where just it's power chords and sewing machine bass pedals. Also fair to say, though, Nico McBrain is quite a character. He brings... Yeah, he's definitely got a vibe. Yeah. But in some ways, the sort of the biggest personality in Iron Maiden, which is quite remarkable in a band with Bruce Dickinson. Yeah, but I think something important about Nico McBrain's character is he doesn't take himself too seriously, which in the context of a band like Iron Maiden, which often does take itself too seriously, to an extent, at least as part of their mythology, I feel like Nico softens a lot of that and brings out the comedic side of the other members in a way that up to this point I don't feel like there's that much comedy about Iron Maiden. Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, he does. Yeah, and you're right. I think sometimes he is a bit of a tonic. Yeah, to that. I think he's a good foil for instance, Steve Harris's sort of dogged vision. And definitely. How much do you want to know about Nico's career before joining Iron Maiden? Not that much. Just give me the key beats. I mean, basically, he'd been a drummer in some bands before being in Iron Maiden. He was in Trust. Great, let's move on. Job done. Right, so shall we get on to... Or before we get on to recording the album, let's try and make sense of the business side of it a little bit. Okay. So when it comes to the band's business affairs, we sort of established and sort of didn't establish. When they signed to EMI, it was either a 3-album, 5-album... Maybe 4 albums. Someone... I forget who on Twitter. Someone helpfully... Yeah, someone laid out what seemed like the facts, which was something like 3 albums with potential for 5. Yeah, 3 albums with potential for 5. So I'm guessing, presuming we're never going to see the contract. Well, You call yourself a researcher, Blev and a historian. I don't think it's probably not in the public domain, is it? No, probably not. But so I'm guessing it was probably the kind of situation where there were 3 albums and then maybe a break clause or some that would make sense, like an option for renewal. Exactly, right, where maybe either party could walk away and then with another 2 potentially, which makes sense because after the success of Number of the Beast, Rod Smallwood renegotiates the band's contract. On much more favourable terms. So he secures a better deal, future advance royalties,
I don't know what that is, and royalties percentages based on the sales of Number the Beast. So what Number the Beast does allow Smallwood to do is to go back to the record company and sort of basically...
They've got more leverage at that point because of their success.
Yeah. And also at this point, Rod Smallwood is joined by the quiet... Well, is he joined at this point, or is he there from the start? It's a bit unclear when he comes onto the scene. But Andy Taylor also becomes a much bigger part of the Maiden management setup.
And who is Andy Taylor?
He's one of Iron Maiden's managers.
Right, okay.
He's the quiet one. He knew Rod Smallwood from Cambridge, so they were both in Cambridge together, and he had been involved in businesses with Smallwood, and it's unclear whether he was there at the start or not. I have genuinely tried to square this circle about when he shows up. He's always the quiet one of the two.
Right.
But basically, Andy Taylor comes on board as the kind of financial accountant side of. Rod becomes more about strategy, big vision,
logistics,
creative direction, and artwork and all that stuff. And he seems to delegate much of the finances to Andy Taylor. One bit of advice that Taylor gives to the guys in Maiden that they do take on board is to all buy houses. And so
did they all buy them in the East End of London? That would be a sound investment.
Well, it would now. Yeah, no.
Yeah.
I think Bruce
I've got a house in Hackney.
Bruce did buy a house in London, I think. Which...
Yeah. That's a great investment.
Early
80s.
Not that I can imagine he's particularly struggling.
No,
for cash.
True.
But, yeah, but they
imagine if they just held on to the houses and become landlords. Imagine if Bruce Dickinson was your landlord. Well, you've never lived in London. He could have been my landlord.
Yeah, he could have been your scum landlord.
Yay! Bruce, the tap's leaking. Please, can you get it fixed? No. I'm on tour. Leave me alone.
I haven't had heating in months, Bruce, please.
Bruce!
Can I have my deposit back? No.
Bruce, I cleaned the house at the end of the tenancy. Why are you charging me for a clean?
But basically, this is, I say the first time in the band's career. It's only 2 years since their first debut album came out, but they are actually...
This all happens so quickly.
Yeah, and they are actually starting to see money now and to be able to buy property. And, when you think they are working class guys from the East End, they are doing very well for themselves. So let's have a quick run through the recording of the album, because... So the recording of Peace of Mind seems like a relatively straightforward affair at this point.
Okay.
Because they seem to have a way of working. They're back with Martin Birch.
But they do have a new member.
So
that adds variables.
Yeah, it does. Although it doesn't fundamentally change the creative process, right?
Okay.
And presumably they're at the same point they were when they were recording Number of the Beast. They need a full album's worth of new material again.
Yeah.
Basically a year after they've just had to come up with another full album's worth of
we're totally
material.
at a point in Maiden's canon, I guess, where they have nothing old to lean on anymore. They didn't for Number of the Beast. They're not doing it for Peace of Mind. It's all fresh all the time. And maybe that explains some of the songs on this album.
Yes, to be discussed.
Not to jump the gun too much, but
it seems the one luxury Maiden do have a bit now, because of the success of Number of the Beast, is they do have a bit more time and comfort. So in January 1983, the band go to Hotel Le Chalet.
Ooh.
Guess where that is?
France?
No, it's on the Isle of Jersey, in the British Channel Islands.
Zut alors. Mon Dieu.
So they basically, again, with a bit more money behind them, they are packed off to the Channel Islands in the off-season in January when the hotel's empty, and they seem to have the run of the hotel for themselves for a month to write a record.
And now all I can imagine is Iron Maiden recording at Butlin's Bognor Regis.
I mean, that's it. Well, they're not even recording at this point. They're writing, right? So this is just the writing session. So they've got all their gear set up in the hotel. They've got the run of the hotel for the best part of a month, and it's just a case of write a record. But apparently with the bar's open 24 hours, and it's just them.
Oh yeah, that can't end badly.
No, what could possibly go wrong? And yet, remarkably, they come out with Peace of Mind. Yeah. There is another reason they go to the Channel Island.
Is it tax avoidance?
It's a tax dodge, yeah.
I mean, that harkens back to what we were saying before about even if it's not illegal, Is it morally good?
Well, it seemed like the thing to do, right? Andy Taylor basically advises the band, look, if you spend a certain portion of the year outside of the United Kingdom, or rather the tax jurisdiction of the United Kingdom, you won't have to pay what was then like a 60% top rate of income tax.
Right, right.
So, yeah, for various reasons, I'm sure the scenery in the Channel Islands in January is delightful.
And it's more delightful when you're sleeping on bags of money.
Yeah. So but at least now, Number of the Beast seems to be written very frantically.
Yeah.
And they didn't have this luxury of like a band retreat.
This is a leisurely written album.
Yeah. Well, you know, you've got a month, you know, give us 10 songs, there or thereabouts.
Yeah. And not recorded, just demoed.
Yeah,
ready to go.
just written, ready to go. And so then once they are ready to go, the next month they go to the sunny Bahamas. As you do, to a Compass Point studio, again with Martin Perch. Compass Point studio, which the band go on to record a few albums at Compass Point.
Well, why wouldn't you?
Well, indeed,
if you can afford to record in the Bahamas, hell yeah.
And quite a famous, I'm pretty sure AC/DC recorded in Compass Point as well. Like, it's, But,
I mean, if your choices are Monmouth, South Wales, or the Bahamas, well, I know where I'm picking.
Well, back to Battery Studios in London, it seems to be like a fairly grimy sort of, go to the Bahamas. And also the source of many quite amusing photos of Iron Maiden in tiny shorts.
So tiny. Not much is left to the imagination.
No. I mean, well, why not take the time now, listeners, to Google Steve Harris tiny denim shorts to see what we mean.
Oy.
Quite a look.
I'm really glad this is only an audio podcast.
Yeah. I mean, what a fine specimen of man, though. I mean, wow. Those legs.
Sure. Let's move on swiftly.
But I like Rod Smallwood. Again, these are Smallwood's own words discussing the decision to go to Compass Point, other than the weather. Quote, it was for tax reasons.
Oh, yay!
Yeah, screw you, NHS.
Don't need your precious welfare state, Britain.
But I've got that sweet run to the hills money. Oh, yeah.
I'm going to spend it all on warm pints of lager.
And even the mixing of the album was done outside of the UK. So they actually went to the famous...
tax reasons as well?
Potentially, but they went to the Electric Ladyland studios in New York.
Ah, cool.
Yeah, another iconic studio. So as well as the tax reasons, it has been speculated that perhaps another consideration here is of Iron Maiden spending so much time, you know, at the very least in the orbit of the USA.
Yeah.
Is that this is where they're focusing their attentions now. Like, an American studio, potentially. I mean, this is speculation, but there's a sense that I mean, at this point, Maiden have, like, they've had a number one UK album.
Yeah.
They are the top of the UK. They are headlining in front of thousands of people in Europe. The last nut to crack, where they are not kind of quite a headline band yet, is the USA. And that leads us on nicely, I guess, to Peace of Mind, which comes out 16th of May, right in the middle of the year, 1983.
83. Wow. It's not even... It's just over a year after Number of the Beast.
Yeah. So we're still 4 albums in 4 years.
That is quite a pelt.
Yeah. And I appreciate we can't have this conversation every single episode, but...
Oh, we can. Oh, we will.
Go on, let's do it. Like, an album a year. It's just mind-boggling.
I'm tired hearing about it.
Oh, I know. It's, and...
I've written one album, and that took years.
and in between Number of the Beast and Peace of Mind, they've played hundreds of concerts.
Yeah.
I mean, over 100 just in America alone.
Although it is really impressive, but I guess if your literal job is to write music and you're putting 8 to 10 hours a day into that, albums will come relatively quickly.
Yes.
Provided, you're skilled at what you're doing.
And it does also seem, again, watching the early days documentary is illuminating, it seems it's from about this point that the Smallwood master plan comes into effect, whereby almost to the month, projecting ahead at least 5 years, Rod Smallwood is going, right, January 85, we're going to record, we're touring in this market for these months, you're writing the songs this month, this is where we're going. The level of kind of projection and the orchestration of it, it is an incredibly tightly run machine.
Yeah,
ship.
definitely. And I think machine is probably a good word for it. To be able to produce quote unquote content at that sort of momentum requires a lot of strategic planning.
Yeah, absolutely. And
it's also how you completely burn out people.
Yeah.
I would assume.
And, looking ahead, it's almost amazing there aren't more sort of rock and roll casualties of Iron Maiden, really, given the strain and the pressure they're under. I mean, they're a remarkably resilient bunch, aren't they, really?
They seem surprisingly fine a lot of the time.
Yeah, but it sounds pretty grueling.
Yeah.
But, also an Iron Maiden, so that's pretty fun.
Although, and we'll come on to it in a future episode, that it's not always rosy.
No, indeed. Yeah, to be discussed. Before we get onto the tracks itself, then, a quick little look at the artwork again.
Yeah, let me bring it up.
No surprise. Come on, Sam. Bring it up in your mind. You know, peace of mind.
Yeah, I know what it looks like in my mind. God, we need to stop saying peace of mind. But I just want to make sure I'm not missing anything.
Fair. So again, obviously, who else are they going to call? Derek Riggs. Apparently, the concept of the pitch to Riggs is a hybrid concept that Steve Harris and Rod Smallwood both came up with. So Steve Harris's idea is for Eddie in a padded cell, like a lunatic asylum. Rod Smallwood didn't really think that was enough, so Rod's idea was the sort of lobotomized Eddie, and that was the pitch to Riggs. We want a lobotomized Eddie in a lunatic asylum. My thing about the Peace of Mind artwork, again, it's another very strong Riggs composition. It's sort of bookended between two very iconic covers, but it is the first Eddie, I think, where we get the sense of Eddie being transposed into different worlds and contexts.
Yeah, I mean, you had a taste of that with Number of the Beast.
Yeah, but the Eddie you get on that still looks like the Eddie.
Yeah, it's still like rock and roll Eddie.
Yeah.
Basically, big mane of hair, baggy ripped t-shirt and jeans. Like it's a metalhead Eddie.
Yeah.
Whereas Peace of Mind is the first time it's like this is more of a character.
Yeah, and there's a kind of... You're right, there is a concept to Number of the Beast. And incidentally, I forgot to mention when we were discussing the tour, the Number of the Beast on the Road tour is the first time we get an on-stage puppet Eddie. Is that
as opposed to Rod Smallwood in a bad costume?
Yeah, as opposed to a Rhodey and or Rod Smallwood just running around going, "Whoa!"
Sure, like a dying chicken.
Yeah, actually, and apparently the concept of it's not even animatronic. You know what I mean? Like the big Eddie, the one who
a stage Eddie.
A stage Eddie. You know, the tall one.
Muppet Eddie.
Muppet Eddie. Yeah, let's go for Muppet Eddie. That was actually borrowed from an opera production the band had seen. Like someone associated with the band, a roadie or tech guy, had been to see some opera production where they had these giant kind of puppet style. I presume there was someone in that Eddie. Right?
Yeah, it must be.
And they approached the person who'd made these sort of giant puppet mock-ups for the opera company and were like, can you get someone like that, but who is like a evil monster guy with long hair and a leather jacket?
Sure.
And they were like, you paying us? Yeah, sure, we can do that.
Then yes, we can.
So again, we have that first proper Eddie, and we'll see again on the Peace of Mind tour, the World Peace tour. See what they did there?
That's a good name.
That is good.
That's a good tour name.
Fair play. And then you get that sort of running theme of a new tour, a new Eddie, and that becomes such a part of Maiden, doesn't it? And I feel this is the first, like, this is a distinctively new Eddie. Get what I mean? It's not just Eddie in a new setting. Like, this is Eddie as like...
Lobotomized Eddie with that sort of little metal thing emblazoned in his forehead, joining him, his cranium to his head, and, like, having no hair. Like, it's quite a stark contrast.
And, when we get onto Power Slave, they take that to a totally another level. What do you make of this artwork, the Peace of Mind cover?
I think it's pretty great. I mean, I think you're right. It's not as iconic as some of the artworks we've had before, but like you say, there's a really strong sense of Eddie's versatility coming across in it. Like, I mean, this is reading far too much into it. But yeah, I just really like the fact that they're playing around with the idea of what is Eddie. He's not necessarily just a straight ahead metalhead zombie. He's he can be anything. And this gets taken to so many different places as we go on. Like, in particular, I love the Seventh Son artwork, and we'll come on to that someday. But yeah, this is definitely the start of that.
Yeah, and in a way, it's sort of a stroke of genius, isn't it? Because you could totally burn this concept out quite quickly. Were you not to sort of go, right. So you almost get the feeling, like with Number of the Beast, there's a kind of stick or twist moment where Maiden go, well, right, do we really run with this thing?
Yeah, do we stick with like hell and Satan and these things?
Yeah, and this is it. You know, in the way that, but you know, Venom for a while were just like, okay, we've got the logo and just variations of pentagrams and or goats.
Yeah.
And after a while, it's just like, okay, yeah, it's a pentagram. It's a pentagram and a goat. Just a goat. Okay, we've just gone for the evil goat.
It's a goat with a brandished pentagram.
Yeah, and then actually by the time they get to their fourth album, they decide to do something different.
It's a sheep!
It was just rubbish. It's just like, this is just a really bad photo. But,
yeah,
you know, well, this is, as Maiden have proved, almost 40 years, well, no, actually 40 years later, this is seemingly an inexhaustible mine of to be welled. Can you well a mine to be mined? I don't even know.
No, but I get what you're getting at. Other than the non sequiturs, I agree.
Yes, yeah. So, yeah, no, it's. I'll be honest with you. Actually, Peace of Mind is a good album cover.
Yeah, definitely.
Not my favourite.
No, but it's solid.
Yeah, and to me, it points towards a much more exciting future for the next few records, at least.
Yeah. I think it's a foundational album cover. I think that's probably the right way.
Definitely.
To regard it.
And it does the job. It captures the title, I guess.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, without that artwork, it's just a weird title, isn't it?
I mean, now I'm just imagining what the cover would be for Food for Thought.
Well, but if you look,
it's just the same, but there's like a meal in front of Eddie.
Well, no, but there is that photo, isn't there? Is it on it's not on the reverse of the original. I believe it's on the reverse of the remaster, which is the band sat around a banquet table with like a pretend, like a clearly fake plastic brain in the middle of it, but surrounded by. So that concept does
live on in some form.
Yes, but like in the hands of a lesser band, that would have just been the cover.
Yeah.
Like I can definitely imagine someone like a second-rate modern band just being like, Witchfinder General, Food for Thought, and that's just the cover.
Yeah, that's fair.
I say that, Witchfinder General, almost all their album covers are like nudie ladies being sacrificed.
Sure. That.
Why not?
Yeah.
And on that note, so that seems like a convenient place to sign off for now before we get into the tracks themselves.
Yeah, definitely. And if you have any thoughts about what we've said so far, you can contact us on Twitter @MaidenPod. Whether or not Twitter will still exist by the time this airs, who knows? We haven't thought of a backup plan yet.
Otherwise, you can write to us at P.O. Box.
No, you can't. We don't have a P.O. box. Sorry, you can email us.
Yeah.
But neither of us can ever get the email address right. I think it's maidenvoyagespod@gmail.com. Otherwise,
give it a go.
Otherwise, just shout into the void. Scream your thoughts about Peace of Mind's run up, and maybe we'll hear you on the grapevine.
Hear, hear.
But until next time, bye.
Bye.